Okay, shall I start?
If you want, I mean,
Yeah,
people will come
yeah,
in.
yeah, and I'll keep posting the collaborative notes. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Vocabulary Semantic Services Interest Group. It's the Plenary 19. I think we are all virtually in. This year's plenary is titled "What is going on in the VSSIG?" Oops, sorry, I just received the message. Should we start the session? Yes, we should start the session. Is this to start recording, maybe? It is being recorded. Okay, so for everybody, to let you know that the session is being recorded. Jan, can you move to the next slide, please? So there is a link to collaborative notes where we would like you to complete the table attendance and check to indicate your attendance. I'll post the link again. And if you want, you can scroll down and add an X in the cell closest to your time of the day. And another
Sorry,
X
but
in the cell. Yeah.
Sorry, we don't see the. You said you posted the link to the notes, but it's not in the chat.
Is it not? Oh.
No, it's not. Sorry. Maybe it's not the chat of the Zoom chat. I don't know. Okay, thank you. It's done.
Oh, okay. Maybe there is another chat, the community chat.
It's on the WoW chat.
It's okay.
So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know. Okay. So and the next one is to add an X to indicate why you have joined the session. So there are a few choices. If you don't find the choice, you can also add another one. And in the collaborative notes, you will find the link to the slide deck and a link to some useful resources we have created on the wiki page of RDA that we will talk about in a bit. So the agenda for today is that we are going to have a quick introduction to the group by me. And then for the next 70 minutes, we will have Barbara Magagna talking to us about the iAdopt recommendations and the future of the working group. And then we can have 15 minutes of discussion and questions for Barbara. The next one is the minimum metadata for semantic artifacts outputs from the task group. And that would be a talk by Jan Lefranc. There will still be a lot of time for questions. And then Jan will present the idea for creating a working group for the FAIR semantics. And then we will end by discussing closing the circle of the group and see what are the next steps that we can take. Jan, can you go to the next one, please? So there will be time for questions, and we would encourage you to, if you want to pose a question to a certain person, to use the format of @ the name of the person and then post your question so that we're clear where the question goes. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to keep the session on time. Jan, can you go to the two next and another one? And I'll just go quickly to the vision, actually, and to the next slide, to the vision of the group. So the vision of the group is to harmonize our ways of working and our current practices relevant to the semantic web technologies through knowledge and expertise exchange across all domains. While our mission as the VSSIG group is to form a network of experts in the realm of semantic web and linked data. Based on this network, we seek to share and discuss new technologies, controversial concepts, new ideas, and existing recommendations. From these interactions, we will seek or trigger to develop community-based approaches and recommendations to make semantic artifacts findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And by that, I'm going to give the floor to Barbara that wants to share her screen, Jan. Barbara, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to share your screen? Oh, okay, yeah.
I will show the screen.
So Barbara will talk to us about the iAdapt framework, and I'll leave it to you.
Can you hear me well, or should I raise? You can hear.
Very well. Okay. Very well.
Good. So do you see my screen? Jan?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. So, and also now the big screen.
Yes.
Yes, the big
Perfect.
screen too, yeah.
So I am presenting on behalf of the RDA iAdopt working group. Sorry, let me close the door. This working group wants to address, first of all, the eye of the FAIR principles. So we want to enable the interoperability between existing terminologies, and promote the use of FAIR terminologies to annotate research data, research outcome with well-identified, unambiguous, and machine-readable vocabularies. This working group has been initiated by me 4 years ago, initially as a task group of the VSSIG. But in 2019, we became officially a working group. This is co-led by Gwen Moncoiffé from the NERC Vocabularies, Anusuria De Varayo, she is a coordinator intern in Australia, and Maria Stoica working at the University of Colorado. And our work group had a core group, including Silko Schindler and Alison Perman. We met twice a month for the last 4 years, to build up the iAdopt framework. And I'm presenting here being part of Go Fair at the moment, but I have been working for a long time for the Environment Agency Austria, in charge of ENFTAS, that's a vocabulary for the Long-Term Ecosystem Research Network. And I initiated this working group because I had to solve a few issues which I found out that they were not specific to the network I was working in, but for many other research infrastructures, mainly in the environmental domain. And that was to address the problem how to describe variables, so what we observe in a way that is systematic and comparable to other descriptions, because I found that there are so many different ways people try to describe what they observe, that it is not possible to find out if what I describe is the same that others do. So we want to find a common way to do this, and we started to define what we mean by a variable. There are synonyms like observable property, parameter, or quantity kind. So we want to say that a variable is addressing what has been observed independently of the where, how, and when a data acquisition event took place, be it an observation, a measurement, a simulation, or calculation. I must say that our focus was mainly the observation and the measurement, but this can also be applied to simulation and calculation. We were mainly inspired by the complex property model and the scientific variable ontology, but our study is based on a quite extensive survey we did in early 2020, where we had more than 100 contributions about existing conceptual models and ontologies and terminologies where this problem was addressed, and we compared those and and tried to find the best way how this can be represented. So let's try to understand what we mean by a variable. All is now, as I said, is based on observations. So let's assume we observe, we want to find out the mean dissolved nitrate molar concentration per unit volume in precipitation water at a specific place in micromole per liter by any sampling process. So what is the observable property, or what is the variable that we should extract from this observation? Is the yellow part. So we keep out the where, the feature, the emerald sea coast, and the method, the process, and concentrate on the yellow part. And we can then discover that we can decompose the yellow part into single elements like mean dissolved nitrate molar concentration per unit volume, precipitation water, and the micromole per liter. And and we can also then come to the conclusion that mean is a statistical measure, and it is not essential for a variable description, because mean can only happen if you have more than one observation. So a variable should not include the statistical measure here. And also the unit, the micromole per liter, is important for describing the observation, but the variable itself can be described or be expressed in different units. So it's unit independent, and therefore we decided to exclude these two and concentrate on this main part. And this is then our variable, the variable that might be expressed in different units. And how these components should be included in the variable description was the topic of our work. And that's about building a conceptual model. And second part is to find for each of these components the adequate semantic artifacts or concepts from semantic artifacts, be it an ontology, a thesaurus, or whatever. So the other recommendations that we have been published, that have been published at the beginning of this year, and which are now also endorsed by the RDA, come with these 5 recommendations. First of all, we think that description should be both human and machine readable. Description should be as explicit and as necessary, and they should contain everything to be understood by others and reused by others. But we don't want to rely on free text documentation. And we advocate to use semantic artifacts which are compatible with linked data. And these semantic artifacts should be fair. And we recommend to use the adopt ontology as the framework to adapt the way you describe it with this decomposition approach. And if you follow the first 4 recommendations, we then also would encourage you to use existing terminologies that are aligned with the IADOP framework. If such a terminology is not available, we recommend to extend existing variable descriptions and create also new variables following the IADOP framework. So what is the IADOP framework? The IADOP framework is a very simple ontology which has 4 classes and 6 associations. And I'm going through this step by step, but essentially it is saying that a variable is composed by one property of one object of interest. And it might also include a matrix and a context object, which are together with the object of interest all entities. And these entities can be constrained. So coming back to the example that I had brought before, a variable is a description of something observed or derived, minimally consisting of an object of interest and its property. So dissolved nitrate molar concentration per unit volume in precipitation water, this is the observable property or the variable. So it is essentially a very specific property, yeah, that contains also other elements like the object of interest and other components of that I will explain below. So we have, that's the variable, the whole description. The property in this description is the mass concentration per unit volume. So a characteristic, a specific characteristic of an object of interest. And so other properties might be abundance, weight, presence. And this description, the variable description, includes also the unit, also the object of interest, which in this case is nitrate. So the property mass concentration per unit volume is observed in the nitrate, and the object of interest in this case nitrate. And matrix is the entity in which the object of interest is contained. So is in this case precipitation. So we are observing the mass concentration per unit volume of nitrate in precipitation. And context object is any additional background information regarding the object of interest. in our example, there is no context object included. Constraints are they limit the scope of the observation and of any entity that is involved in the variable description. In this case, is dissolved. So it constrains. It constrains nitrate. So we are looking at the dissolved nitrate. But the constraint can also happen to play a role for the matrix or the context object. It could also include conditions like at a specific temperature or a specific atmospheric pressure. So entities are entities, the class that includes all the objects that play a role in the description. The different roles are object of interest, context object, and matrix. Applied to the example, what does this mean? So the variable is the whole description. You can decompose it in according to the framework in a property, object of interest, constraint, and matrix. And you can find for each of these components specific concepts from other any semantic artifact. In this case, it is from Oscar, a thesaurus from Oscar, called Oscar. And you see here that for each of these, we found concrete terms. And this is how it looks like in the Oscar thesaurus. It is a SCOS thesaurus implemented in Cosmos. You see at the bottom that the main concentration is, or the main IRI used here is for the whole variable. And apart from this cost relations, we included also all the relations based on the IADOPT ontology. So the has property, has object of interest, has matrix, and has constraint. So
Barbara,
yes,
Barbara, it's
yes.
2 more minutes, please. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going. I'm being quick now. So the IADOPT framework has a benefit to support interoperability between existing terminologies. It enables semantically precise and fair descriptions. It helps to decompose these descriptions into atomic components and link them to existing vocabulary that are machine readable. And we provide abstract reusable semantic descriptions. This enables mappings across terminologies without changing the existing structures, but it adds rich descriptions with qualified reference. And we are convinced that this will not only increase interoperability, but also the findability and reusability aspects of the FAIR principles. And these are our outcomes. We have this recommendation report, the ontology, also a catalog of terminologies with more than 100 terminologies, where you can then look up which components can be used, which concepts you can use for the different components. Then we have additional material like alignments to other frameworks, existing implementations, and variable design patterns that we are going to develop, and the step-by-step guide for minting new variables. So this is an ongoing work. We want to abstract these descriptions and find patterns. And we are currently working on different implementations. Like ENFDES, the NERC vocabularies applies this approach for providing different mappings of the same descriptions. And Oscar has already implemented our framework, but also other research infrastructures like LifeWatch are implementing this now. And we are collaborating with the O&M, Observation Measurement Group, to extend it with the IADOP descriptions for their observable property. I'm skipping this. So this is the outlook. We are working now on providing services so that end users can use our IADOP framework without having to bother about all these mappings. But this is still work in progress. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. It's a very important framework. I don't see any questions, but you can also raise hands if you have questions. And if you don't, I have. So either raise a hand or put something in the chat. My question, Barbara, is how extensible is the framework to other domains other than the environmental domain that it currently applies to?
Sorry, I didn't get the first two words. So what did you say?
Okay, how is it? How extensible? How extensible is this framework?
Yes,
yeah,
to other domains. So
to
I'm already working with the health domain. I'm working with different other domains. But I think at the moment it's still experimental. So I think we will need another half year to show that this is also applicable to other domains, but specifically everywhere where you do observations and measurements, this might be applicable. So this is domain dependent, but the different observations have also different constraints and might involve other components that might be important then to extend our IADOP framework. So this will have to be found out, and the ontology is not set in stone. So we can always extend it or also come to new versions if necessary. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And
so
one
next
more is,
week,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next week I have my first workshop in GoFair where we apply this framework for infectious diseases. So let's see
okay.
if you can then report back about this.
Okay, that's great. Anybody else having a question? And please help me because I'm not sure I can see the hands.
Otherwise, I want to say that we are now in a maintenance mode. So we are not continuing this intensive work as we had before, because some of us are really implementing here services and further developments for applications. But we need some time, to come to conclusions that we also want to publish in papers and so on. So we are working silently, but we are still working in the background, and we will for sure at the next session. I don't know when the next one will be, the plenary session. We will then also present what we could find out and what we could improve.
Okay, so where can we follow what is your outputs from? So because you are
GitHub,
in maintenance mode.
as you can see here, that's our GitHub link.
Okay.
IADOP, and we will also encourage everybody to look at those. And if you have any recommendations from your side that we should include, or any patterns you would like to be considered, or variable descriptions, please go to this link. You will see different repositories.
Excellent. Okay, and I have one more question. That is, have you done any interoperability tests between the different implementers of iAdapt framework?
Well, that's a bit too early. So we have now a few implementers. We have to compare this. That's certainly interesting to do, to see if they also interpreted the framework in the current way, as in the intended way, and see if there are some gaps also in the descriptions. So, but this is a bit too early.
Okay, my take on that is to do the test as early as possible, even if you only implemented a few stuff. Don't wait for the end of the implementations. No. Yeah, just do the test as early as possible to see.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Barbara. We will be following you. I'll go to, I think Jan will need to share his screen now. Thank you. I haven't seen the screen yet, Jan. Not yet, not yet. Yeah, now I can. So Jan will talk about the minimum metadata for fair semantic artifacts, and I'll give the floor to you, Jan.
Thank you, Alexandra. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depends on where you're located, I guess. As Alexandra reminded in the chat, please add your names in the list in the collaborative note. So I'm going to give a short overview of the work we've been doing in the context of FAIR, which was a European project that ended end of February this year, about defining a minimum metadata for fair semantic artifacts. And this is a collaborative work that's been done with the RDA VSSIG, in particular our task group on metadata. And I'm going to present on behalf of my colleagues Clément Jonquet, Biswana Dutta, Luis Bonino, and Robert Pergo. So why this work? Well, we all have a common objective, which is to, in the end, create a harmonized and searchable data landscape so that we can start working and reusing data and scientific data that's been generated by colleagues. And the idea is that we can use that landscape for answering questions we cannot do ourselves. And the question is how we do that? Well, the idea is to use the FAIR principles. So what we started to do in the FAIR project is we started to look at the FAIR principle by themselves. So you have 15 different principles that are spread over 4 main topics: findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And we've been focusing on one that Barbara already mentioned, which is the principle I2 that foster interoperability, which says that actually metadata and data should use vocabularies that also follows the FAIR principles. So a large part of the work that's been doing in FAIR was to actually try to come up with some recommendation. And then when you start looking around, if you think about applying this principle, what it means is that you need to consider vocabularies, ontologies, control thesauri, and so on as data, right? To apply the FAIR principles. And if you do so, then you will encounter the other principles like principle F2 and R1 that are interlinked, that says that actually data are described with rich metadata, and they should be richly described with a plurality of accurate and relevant attributes. So basically, to make vocabulary fairs, or what we call semantic artifacts, to be broad and encompassing low semantic and high semantic artifacts, basically they need to be well described with metadata. So we asked several questions out of this reading, and the first one, so how can we build fair vocabularies, ontologies, meaning here semantic artifacts? Can we set a threshold to define rich metadata for semantic artifacts? And can we demonstrate the usefulness of a common metadata standard for semantic artifacts? To answer these questions, we've been working for 3 years in the FAIR project, and we organized several workshops with different communities, and we collected a lot of inputs. And I would like to thank also the people from RDA that actually contributed extensively to this work. So we have a third version of the FAIR semantics recommendation that has been published on Zenodo. So I put the DOI here so you can actually have a look at them. To answer the question on threshold, we started working within the project on defining a minimum common metadata for FAIR semantic artifacts. And for the third question about demonstrating the usefulness of such common metadata, we started to create a federated catalog of semantic artifacts that are coming from distributed and heterogeneous semantic artifact repositories. So why defining a minimum metadata for FAIR? If you read the principle, it says that data must be documented with rich metadata. So if you take a scale of metadata richness, if there's no metadata descriptor, basically it's not fair. But then the question is between no metadata descriptor and let's assume an infinite number of metadata descriptor, what do you define as fair? When do you stop, basically? And so the idea we came up with was to say, okay, we need a threshold below which you're not fair and above which you will be more fair or fairer. And so the idea is to actually establish this minimum metadata as threshold for fair artifacts, which would be very useful for FAIR evaluators, for instance. So this work has been actually been possible due to the collaboration with the RDA VSSIG ontology metadata task group that is led by Clément Jonquet. And in this group and prior work, basically they have been assessing the practice of ontology metadata and generated a survey that you can find on with the link provided on the slide. That led to the creation of a dedicated vocabulary, metadata vocabulary to describe semantic artifacts, which is called MODE, and the version 1.4 is actually available here and the paper as well. And basically this MOD or MOD vocabulary has been used to constrain the metadata and enrich the metadata of the semantic artifacts that are published in AgroPortal. And the idea of this work was to actually use and expand MOD to develop a new version that will be used to actually generate the minimum profile and to be used as a common metadata schema. So we actually worked together toward the design of MOD 2, which would be a DCAT2 extension profile for semantic artifacts. So in that group and in Clément's group, so basically they have been analyzing the use of metadata vocabularies to describe ontologies. So they analyzed 805 ontologies. They also analyzed the existing metadata vocabularies. So they looked into 23 of them. And they also looked at the use of metadata vocabularies in various ontology repositories, including BioPortal, LOV, OboFoundry. And basically, taking this into account, they all merged and converged and identified 346 relevance properties that could be used to describe ontology. And they actually defined and used 127 metadata descriptors to build a new metadata model, which is MOD 1.4, which is available here. And you can see this MOD 1.4 contains 24 classes, 44 object properties, and 96 data properties. So the idea was to take this mode 1.4, which actually already aggregates several existing metadata vocabularies together, and to extend it to integrate one DCAT classes, so that actually mod can be used also for describing or publishing collections of semantic artifacts, and use the 137 metadata elements that are defined in mod to actually extend the description of metadata. So what we did once we defined this model and how both aligned, we co-organized a workshop together with Ferris Fair. This workshop was held in June last year. We had 76 participants from 17 different communities. During the workshop, we presented MOD2, or at least the first draft of MOD2, with the link to the DCAT for which we actually created definite specialized classes. And then we started to discuss the minimum metadata, meaning what are the, among the 127 elements of MOD, which one should we pick and make mandatory? And then based on the use case where we actually try to set the context, the idea is indeed for this use case to actually build a search engine for finding semantic artifacts. And based on that, we started asking the participants to vote on what they believe are the most important metadata properties for artifacts in their catalogs. So basically, we went through the DCAT profile, the DCAT metadata element, and voted them to make them either mandatory, recommended, or optional. And therefore, we started building up a DCAT profile for semantic artifact that was then enriched with 12 properties from MOD that we selected among the 127 as highly relevant and important. So once we had this voting, we analyzed the vote, and we started to build a profile formalization of that machine-readable and actionable version of that metadata schema or profile as OWL and shackle for validation. If you have any question in the process, please do not hesitate to interrupt me, right? So once we have defined this minimum metadata based on DCAT and MOD, what we wanted to do is to say, okay, we have a minimum metadata. This would build with the idea of building a search engine. Now we need to test it. And how can we test it? Well, what we need to do is try to convert the metadata descriptions of semantic artifacts that are contained in different semantic artifact repositories. So what we did is to work with our colleagues from EOS Pillar and use their technology, which is called the Federated Fair Data Space, that is based on a paper by Doron Goldfarb and myself. And we created and extended that Federated Fair Data Space technology to create the FairCat service. And that service allows to aggregate and publish content of semantic artifact repositories aligned with the semantic artifact DCAT profile, basically. And to do this work, we actually selected 3 repositories for this, BioPortal, AgroPortal, and the NERC vocabulary service. The idea of this technology is that you have services and user interfaces that allow you to actually connect and fetch the metadata from repositories, do the mapping between the semantic DCAT profile and the current profile in BioPortal or NERC vocabulary, for instance, and using this mapping to convert it and publish it in the Fair Data Point, which was also developed in Ferris Fair. So basically, Fair Data Point is a DCAT store where you can dump large collections of data sets aligned with the DCAT model. So we're still finishing the work because we had some issues, so we need to finalize this. So we will provide the link to the Sparkle endpoint to actually test and benchmark the semantic DCAT profile. And in the meanwhile, you can already find the OWL file and the shackle file of the semantic DCAT profile on the GitHub repository that I show up here. Briefly, Faircat, basically Faircat, you have a client which provides a lot of user interface in which you will actually start putting together machine readable API description. That API description is actually using the smart, is actually using the Smart API framework. Once we have defined the Smart API framework, then the backend API server is going to actually harvest the metadata content from the semantic artifact repository. Once you get that content, it will generate metadata schema of the content. And that can be used then for doing the mapping between the SemDCAT profile and the metadata of the repository. Once these mappings are defined, they are stored in the database and then can be used to convert and publish the metadata on the Fair Data Point service through the API server. And then you can start navigate the catalogs and the data sets using the FDP client, which provides a nice user interface for navigating. In the backend, everything is converted as RDF and published as RDF using the AllegroGraph database. So follow-up and perspective, we are still continuing to work with Clément to refine MOD2 and finalize this first release as an extension of DCAT for semantic artifacts and the catalogs. We're going to release as well in parallel the Fair is Fair minimum metadata, which includes the MOD fields, and the tooling, which means the formal description as OWL and the shackle validator. We'll publish the Fair Data Point, the data in the Fair Data Point, and publish the Fair Data Point information so that the community can actually benchmark and test and say, can I find my semantic artifact or the one I want using that metadata profile? And we are currently working in the context of another project with fair evaluators such as FOOPS or OFAIR that are specialized for assessing the fairness of semantic artifacts to integrate this metadata schema in their evaluation. And this work is going to be continued in another project that's called Fair Impact that has been launched this month, where we will be working on metadata and catalogs for semantic artifacts and also on mappings. Now, I'd like to conclude with
one more minute, Jan.
Yeah,
one more
sure.
minute, please.
Yeah, I'd like to conclude with an argument on why we should converge on a common metadata schema. So for me, and that's my personal opinion, we have two options. One is we do not have a common metadata schema. So in practice, what will it mean when we start building search engines that will work on semantic artifacts? Well, we will need to create mappings to interrelate the different standards that exist. These mappings should be maintained over time, which requires some governance and also involves some costs. These mappings should be shared, so they should be fair, which increase the cost. And if you start thinking about the search engine, well, it should handle a very large number of mappings to provide a federated search. And to be efficient, you will have a lot of work to do on the performance to actually make sure that you get an answer to your query in less than 2 minutes. The option two is we agree on a common metadata set, on common set of metadata fields, and extend it with community-specific additional metadata. Well, there's still mappings involved in that option, right? But much less. And so basically the idea is that by using this common metadata schema, it will highly reduce the constraints on any search engine we would like to build, at least for the semantic artifact, but that can be generalized for data. So I would like to leave you with that thought. That's my personal opinion. Of course, I'm open for discussion now. And if you have any questions, please fire. Thanks.
Excellent. I see that Barbara has posted 2 questions. Barbara, you're free to unmute, turn on your camera, and ask Jan your questions, please.
Yes, I have a few questions. So first of all, where do I see the latest state of this MOD? Or what should I use now when I create vocabulary as metadata elements? Because there are now different tables that I can consider, but what would you recommend? Because it's not final yet. So should I take the MOD 1.4 or 2 or?
So right now we haven't released yet the MOD 2.0. So that's work in progress. I think there is a link somewhere on the GitHub of MOD where you can find the latest version. So but you can already start using the MOD 1.0.
Yeah. It would be so nice always to know what is the latest version we should look at, because I'm always producing stuff, and I always say it's so necessary, but I don't know yet where to look or what to use, right?
Sure.
Nice
so MOD 1.4 is already stable, so you can use this one actually for the metadata descriptors for the ontology. Now the extension is going to add PCAT classes, which does not necessarily impact an individual ontology. It's more, these classes are going to be used by semantic artifact repositories to actually publish content, right? So you can already use that. And in the Fair recommendations, the latest version, there's a table where we actually list all the different descriptors, whether or not they're mandatory, recommended, or optional. And for ontology, you can actually look at those that are coming up from MOD to use them. Okay. These ones were, I think, mandatory.
Yeah, but for example, Cosmos doesn't allow the extent. So some applications are not so flexible enough to extend the metadata elements, right? So I hope
which is a shame, right?
there will be. Sorry?
Which is a shame, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to actually document your ontology or your control vocabulary, right?
Yeah, and so then there's an. Yeah, so I don't know. I hope that this will be possible to communicate with this Cosmos or other applications, so that this will be more flexible and extend the possibilities. Otherwise, we cannot take this into account. And then the other question is, I find this, how's it called, cut, your application that you are doing. So really interesting and important. Will it be extensible so that you also include other NCBO repositories like EcoPortal, because that might be easy, right? But also OLS ontology lookup service would be good, and others.
So basically you can extend, so I didn't, because of the time, I didn't want to go and make a presentation on that. So it should be a 15 minutes presentation by itself. So the Faircat allow you to add as many repositories you want, basically as long as they have a RESTful API that you can describe with Smart API description. So you can extend to EcoPortal, AgroPortal. So we just took 3 to actually have diversity of content and diversity of APIs. So that's why we have 2 OntoPortal appliance and 1 the NERC vocabulary service. And so basically, if you want the user interface allow you to define metadata, provide metadata on the repository, and then do the description of the API calls that are necessary to collect the metadata for each of the semantic artifacts. Once you have defined that, then you just have in a click of a button, you click and it harvests all the content. And you could do that with mostly threading to avoid killing the server on spot with too many requests. Once you have fetched all the metadata that you want, then you can we reconstruct the global schema and we give you access to that schema to do the mappings. So technically, in the EOS pillar, it's used for data repositories. What we did here is to actually extend it for semantic artifact repositories.
That's fine, but I hope it's not just
exactly technology.
Enabling this the metadata mapping or to include all this metadata. I hope it's also possible then to sparkle over the content of all these ontologies. That would be so nice to have, because I would need it for the IADOC development, right? To carry out.
So right now you will be able to sparkle on the fair data points on the DCAT description, so not on the content. So for the content, we need to work. So we have a small toy project in EOS Pillar where basically we use the FAIRCAT or Federated Fair Data Space to actually start building an index of content of semantic artifact repositories. So you can do that as long as you collect the metadata, you can describe the full API. So you can also collect the content. However, for the content of ontologies, you cannot do the mappings, right, with DCAT, because DCAT is for the semantic artifact, not the content yet. So basically, what you will need to do is to actually connect the FAIRCAT to something else to actually get the content of your ontology. But yeah, that's doable.
2017, you tried to do this, yeah, to sparkle over
it worked,
concepts across different repositories. But are you considering to go this step also for, so that others can use the smart API?
Yes.
But it is a long way, right?
Well, the problem, so it's not that a long way. The problem is money. It's project. So we need a project that allow us to do that. We have the technology now, so it can be made very quickly. But then we need the money, because when you start collecting the content, you also need to go through a curation phase, because in some repository like BioPortal, you get 900 ontologies, but they are ontologies that are not really clean, that you do not necessarily want to have in your database. So you need to go through them and make sure that the content is usable, right? So there is this curation step that is going to take some time. And once you have that, you can have a simple database that gives you access to the whole content. But in any case, yes, that would be something that would be valuable. Yeah.
Well, why do you want to make the curation? So you have the repositories and you get the content they have, and it's their responsibility to create or not. I think you cannot solve every problem.
But sometimes, to be honest, so I do recall, so I need to go back, but the 2017 paper, actually, we described something we implemented. So we created an index, so a Solar index with the content of BioPortal. And when we created the first version of that Solar index, we had issues because there were ontologies that were not properly imported because of the format, or I don't know what happened, that gives you weird labels and weird content. So if you want to use the index for search, you end up having this weird stuff laying around, which may be polluting your search
Completely
So the
understood.
idea
Thank
would
you.
be to make something clean. So it's not in-depth curation, it's just checking that, you know, the ontology is
Informal.
actually properly represented in BioPortal. But still, I mean, when you have 900 ontologies plus, that takes some time.
Yeah, thank you for this. And now I understand.
Excellent. Can I ask, so the target group of MOD is people that create ontologies. Yeah, but also, so the ontology or semantic repository curators, but also people that are developers that create search engines for semantic artifacts, or bigger repositories that aggregate a lot of semantic artifacts that are in different places, isn't it?
Yes.
Or
Well,
tools like Cosmos, as Barbara said. So you're targeting more developers and ontologies than anybody else.
Yeah, so clearly this is for ontologists, or I mean, people doing semantic artifacts, building semantic artifacts. One of the idea that I didn't mention that we'll try to do was to actually create what we called seed files for ontologies and controlled vocabularies, where you have an old file that already contains the metadata elements you need to fill in your ontologies. And the same should work with scopes. So that's something that we can discuss in the group, actually. That's something of interest, because then if you have these 12 mandatory fields for an MOD already in the overall scopes or OWL file, you don't have to search for them. They're already pre-loaded into the tool.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
And you just have to fill them in.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
I would
I
have
can take that
question.
as a point. Yes.
How often do you meet in your group? So is it possible to step in sometimes? So
yes, of course.
In
So
the
will we talk
group?
about that? Sorry.
Yeah, the MOD group.
Well, we didn't have a meeting in a while because we were all pretty busy. So, but of course, we'll. I think we are going to continue the discussion in the attempt of having regular RDA VSSIG meetings, so that actually we can discuss with the people who are joining these meetings. So that's something we have been trying to do with Alexandra in the past 6 months, is to try to organize regular meetings in the VSSIG, so we can discuss topics like metadata and get the task group to explain what they're doing and collect feedback from the communities. So right now we don't have a meeting anymore, except for because we're planning to write the paper and we're trying to finalize all the versions so that everything is clean and people know exactly which version to use and where to go. So we're still working on documentation.
Okay. Can I close this one now and
Sure.
let us go to, thank you very much. It's very interesting, and we hope it harmonizes the semantic landscape. Yeah, Barbara's work harmonizes the semantic landscape on the observable property level, and that's on the generic level of semantic artifacts. Shall we go to the next talk, which is by Jan again, and he is looking for interested people to create a working group for fair semantics. And I'll leave it on you, Jan.
Yeah, sorry, there is a legacy slide that were in the middle that created confusion on my side. So yeah, so okay. Related to the discussion we just had and the presentation I just gave. So
you don't share yet your screen, Jan?
I am sharing my screen.
Sharing.
Actually, I didn't. So why did it stop sharing?
Yeah, now yes.
Yes. So So it's related to the presentation I just gave, where I mentioned the work of FAIR, and in particular, the recommendation on FAIR semantics. So basically how to make semantic artifact fair. So the FAIR project has ended. Just give me a sec. Yeah. So we have this recommendation that has been developed in collaboration with the RDA VSSIG. The third version of this recommendation has been released in February this year. And if you haven't checked, I encourage you to actually go to Zenodo and look at the latest version. During this third iteration of the recommendation, we didn't get much feedback from communities, which despite all our efforts, to me, I will take it on the positive spin that says that basically the recommendations are well understood and there's no need to change them too much. But now we need to move to another level, which is looking at how to implement them in practice. So we have 17 generic recommendations. We have 12 best practices. The recommendations are aligned with the RFC 2119, which means that basically they have been classified as mandatory, recommended, and optional. So we have nine mandatory recommendations, 7 recommended recommendations, and 1 optional, and 1 that is undetermined because it's related to search engine. So what is new in the version 3? Well, we still had some feedback, so we actually changed and updated the recommendation with the feedback we got. Although it's interesting to see that it's actually quite stable. It was just details. And then what we started to work on is to think about a prototype service architecture and the requirements of the different elements, which actually links to what Barbara was saying about Cosmos. So maybe that there are requirements that we need to actually push to Cosmos to help the metadata description of the semantic artifacts. So the idea was to actually think, go at the global level, what kind of service would we need to work with FAIR semantic artifacts? We also have been looking at the various best practices. So we have best practices and we cite others, but the idea was to start thinking about how can we align these best practices all together. And we also are describing the work we've done with the metadata profile that I just presented before. Now, project has ended in early March, and I think there's room for improvement, and there's still a lot of work to do on these recommendations. So what I would like to propose is to actually create a FAIR semantics working group to continue working on this recommendation, and this time maybe certainly looking at real practical solutions and which one would be the best to implement such recommendation. And what we would like to do as well is to, through that FAIR semantics working group, connect with the other groups that are building community best practices to actually see if we can converge on at least a set of common best practices, so that ease the process and the interoperability between communities. While putting the slides, there are different potential topics of the discussion in the group that we can discuss. One is to harmonize the PID landscape for semantic artifacts and to see what are the different ways of actually creating a globally unique and persistent and resolvable identifier. So for instance, you have the Perl that's been used by the biomedical community quite extensively. There's W3ID. Should we use handles? If we're using PURL or persistent URL, whether it's Perl or W3ID, should we start thinking about URL convention that could be used for a semantic artifact? The same goes for naming the semantic artifact. and using acronyms, which is often used as an identifier for the ontologies, and also talking about governance of PIDs. How do you make sure that the Perl or W3 ID is actually relevant for more than a year and is actually maintained, especially the redirects. The other aspect is to continue the discussion on metadata. As I was saying, the work we've done in FairSpare is actually a first pass, and now we would like to refine it. So of course, we have the fair impact work where we are going to continue the discussions, but we would like to broaden the audience and to make sure that we can hear and get inputs from the different communities as well, so that we can actually have consensus, not only at the European level, but at the international level. And then work on requirements for tooling, like common API, minimum metadata, and things like that. And the last topic is governance of the semantic artifact, which includes provenance, deprecation process, and also licensing and so on. Now, what do we need to do for the working group? What we need to do is to define the group scope and the expected outcome, define the
Jan,
work plan. Yes?
Jan, one more minute, please.
Sure. Define leadership and define also the partnerships we need to establish with communities outside of RDA. And so now the question is how. What I would like to propose is for you, if you're interested, already send me an email to let me know if you would like to join the group. I'm planning to start having brainstorming and writing session to create the description of the group starting in September, because now it's summer period, so it's going to be tricky to get people on board. Maybe have a bi-weekly meeting to actually have work move fast there. And the idea would be to have a submission deadline by December, January next year at the latest. And that's pretty much it. So again, if you are interested, drop me a line and I will add you in the loop, send a doodle for organizing the first brainstorming session in September. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Jan. I see that you have a question from Françoise. Françoise, do you want to turn on your microphone and ask the question?
I have a practical suggestion, which is to send a message. We are not many around the table today, so to send a message to the group list to ask for people who could be interested. And I was also wondering whether the working group could be used to gather feedback from implementation, or you want to use the interest group for that. I don't know, but it's, you know, for the working group, you need to have a work plan with deliverables. So gathering feedback from implementation can be rather a task for the interest group. But I think that RDA is a good place to do that if there is no host for the moment for the recommendation, for the FairSpare recommendation itself. So I think that this has to be done somewhere.
Yes, I agree with you. So I don't know. So that's the thing that I would like to discuss in September. I mean, it would be, if we want to be practical and take the FairSpare recommendation to a practical level, I think we need to define use cases in the working group. So what we'll see is, depending on who wants to participate, if we can have specific use cases to actually look at implementation and collect the feedback from implementation. Now, if we do not succeed to do that within the working group, we'll definitively use the interest group. And so that's also part of the things we would like to do with Alexandra, is to extend the reach of the interest group, because there are many discussion in other interest groups that are more domain specific on ontologies and semantic artifacts. However, we do not get in touch so often with the other groups. So the idea would be to extend that and see whether or not it would be okay in their domain to test and let us know what they think about the recommendation and what works, what didn't work, so that will help improving things.
Yes, it will be useful to have a message, at least to the vocabulary interest group, explaining what you plan to do.
Okay.
Yes, definitively. So today was a call. I know that it's very early in European time, so we do not have that many attendees, and it's late in the US as well. So, but yes, we will send a message to the whole group.
Yeah.
So I will send the doodle to everyone so that they can join. See, Barbara wants to say something.
Barbara, yeah, Barbara.
Yes, I just want to say I second very much what François said, because now when you see these recommendations, you have to implement it. And I would be willing to follow this and also be part of the group. I'm not willing to coordinate this because I have done this now for years. So I'm happy if others do this. Because I know it's quite intense, but if you succeed in having a working group, you can make a lot of good progress. I think in the interest group, it's just a loose, you come together, you discuss a little bit, but nobody feels really in the need to really contribute with substantial work. Yeah. So it would be great to have a working group, and I would be one of the members. Yeah, and I have I have use cases, quite many.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah, so shall we move to the closing part of the session today? I can share my screen, Jan, because
let me stop sharing. Just give me a sec.
Okay.
Well, I think I stopped sharing. No,
you have, I think. Just let me know if you see my screen.
Yes, I see your screen.
Ah, you can. Okay, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So the last part of the session is the closing the circle and the next steps for the VSSIG. I don't want to talk too much. The only thing I want to say is that we are actively searching for new chairs. So if you're interested, please contact Jan and myself if you are interested to be a co-chair of the group. I'll also say that we decided to, through your feedback, to meet twice every 2 months. We met in January and May this year. We are not sure exactly, we are not sure about the timings. So the first meeting was at 10 p.m. CET, and the next one was at 8 a.m. CET. So we are not sure what is the best way to meet. Australians tend to like the times, but not very much the Europeans. So we need to maybe circle around the doodle to understand what you like. We have also created a wiki page where we have posted some useful material like several earth and environmental vocabularies, the list of tools for semantic resources, and several stuff that our members have shared with us. So the link is there. We would like to see more of you participating in the bi-monthly calls. And there are several topics that we have gathered, we have collected through the years. Some topics you have voted for regular sessions are technology that you would like to see, technology updates, new services and new methodologies, updates from research projects, updates from task groups and working groups, and focused technical discussions. I have a link here, which is for, and I'll just take it. It's a collaborative platform that we would like to see your input. So we have, I didn't share the link, which is, let me just check the chat, which is here. So this is, if you go in, we have the 3 basic topics, and we would like your use cases. So what do you want to see from technology updates? what do you want to see from updates from the research projects and other initiatives? And what would you like to see from focused technical discussions? You may already have issues that you would like to discuss. Please click on the, and you can zoom in like this, or I think Control++ zooms in, and then you click and say, you know what, I would like to see, let me just move, technology updates on MOD and, for example, the FAIR CAT, or I would like to see more on semantic search engines, or I want to see how digital twins will be utilizing semantics, or I want to see upper ontologies or ontology commitment, ontological committed ontologies versus lightweight ones, discussion, and so on. So I would like to leave that for 5 minutes to you, to go in and add things that you are interested in. I hope you can edit, you can write.
It takes time to be able to edit.
It takes time to be able.
I asked for permission and they told me to wait to see something in my emails.
Oh, really? Okay. Yes. Okay, let me just.
I can copy that or use that link. There's another chat where it is possible. But I cannot take that from.
You can't write in.
I cannot use the link. I don't know. If you put it on the other chat, it would be better.
Okay, on the. Okay.
Or you put it in the collaborative notes. That's also fine.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it on the collaborative. Yeah.
It is in the collaborative notes already because I looked for it there.
Okay, I have it now.
Okay, I'll put it on the other chat too. Here. Okay, you couldn't. Okay, I understand, Barbara. So, let me see if it says can edit. And we want to copy the link. I'll put it again. Okay. Okay. Can you check that you can write now?
We still have to ask for access, for edit access.
Really, because it came to me. Can you try?
I think the system knows you.
Is it still asking you for permission?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Enter as a guest, then you fill in your information, and then it says that it will send you an email. But
yes, this is what I got too, and I didn't get the email for the moment. And I asked in the previous implementation. So.
Oh, okay. So maybe it can't work. So I could move that to the collaborative nodes then, and we can add. I'll put it here then, so that we can add content in the collaborative nodes. So we can add here on technology updates. I want to see, for example. Did you?
Yeah, but that's strange because, well, they force you to create an account, of course.
Okay, so don't worry. So I moved it over to the VSSIG to the collaborative notes. So you can add here. I'll just make it smaller. Okay. For example, your work with MOD is really good because most of the people ask, how do I find the right vocabulary or the right term or the right ontology that I want for my work?
Yeah, working with ontologies and semantic artifacts can be a pain, right? So the question is, why is it a pain? It shouldn't. That's the thing. It should be easy. We should have tools.
Yeah.
Even for ontologists, it's a pain.
Yeah. I think I told you that the work we were doing with so I see people writing IOSC. No. Okay, I'll wait. IOSC Task Force for Semantic Interoperability.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually a good one, because we all know that they provided some the semantic interoperability framework, haven't they, or recommendations for IOSC?
Not yet. So actually, part of that, of course. So we're still working on that. So there's the legacy work that's been generated by Oscar and the previous task force, where it's the IOSC interoperability framework document.
Okay, so that would be great to contact. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, to contact the groups to get updates and bring them in our regular meetings.
Okay. So I'll talk about it when we have a task force meeting.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, I'll let you write, and I'm gonna go back to. So these were like some obstacles you have identified as a group that are obstructing you from using ontologies and semantic artifacts in the right way. We will add a few lines of the summary of the session and the key outcomes of the session. And we have 1 more minute to go. Thank you very much for an engaging session. I like when you participate. It's more interesting when people speak up and engage with the session. And we will see you soon in the regular sessions. And of course, the working group that Jan will be creating. I will be in as well, Jan.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.